Resident Evil 4 is one of the greatest games of all time. It's action-packed, it's scary, it's hilarious, it's goofy, its graphics were so good on the GameCube it didn't even make sense. It's a cinematic experience, it's also very arcadey and replayable. It does everything all at once and excels at everything. It defined an entire genre of third-person shooters for tons of games following it to this very day. It's one of the most influential games of all time. All fucking time. This game was crazy as fuck when it came out. It completely abandoned the fixed camera perspective and survival horror roots the series was known for and opted for high-octane run-and-gun action with over-the-top melee attacks and copious supplies of ammo to become an unstoppable one-man army to save the president's daughter. It's such a drastic change in pace that Resident Evil purists were bound to hate it from the jump, but Resident Evil 4 was so fucking good that it completely restructured the entire series, did a complete 180, turned that son of a bitch sideways, threw all that old crap to the wayside, and no one gave a shit. That's how good this game was. So when Capcom announced the Resident Evil 4 remake, it's like, what the fuck are they doing? Resident Evil 4 still plays incredibly well, it's been ported to every system imaginable, the graphics still hold up, and this remake will never match the incredible legacy of the original. It's like, yo, we're remaking The Godfather, we're gonna do it better this time. Like, fuck off. So with all that said, this remake felt like an entirely fruitless endeavor and I didn't care at all. However, after seeing some people play through the Chainsaw demo and hyping it up, I decided to give it a shot regardless, and wouldn't you believe it, this game is really good. Because not only is it a remake of one of the greatest games of all time, but it's also arguably a brand new experience. You see, the Resident Evil 4 remake is not just cynically updating the graphics and copying and pasting the levels over to the new game engine. They really took the opportunity with this game to truly restructure and remix the entire experience while also respecting the source material where it matters. In fact, this game is essentially a sequel to the Resident Evil 2 remake. While Leon still got all of his important character traits from the original game by being a badass and shouting off goofy one-liners, he also still carries over a bit of his personality from the Resident Evil 2 remake, with the events of the Raccoon City incident playing a much more vital role in this game's story. Overall, the most enjoyable aspect of the Resident Evil 4 remake is re-experiencing the original game from this new perspective, so much so that the game has tons of subtle payoffs that would only be appreciated by those who have played the original game and the Resident Evil 2 remake. Combat is very similar to the original game with a heavy emphasis on headshots and melee attacks, but Leon's movement has been greatly expanded, with the tank controls of the original game no longer being a limiting factor. You can run around in any direction regardless of the camera's orientation, you can shoot and move at the same time, you can reload your gun while running away from Ganados, and Leon's knife also plays a much more important role during combat by allowing you to escape from grabs, parrying projectiles, blocking attacks from Ganados, stopping insta-kill chainsaw attacks, and also allowing you to perform quick kills and follow-up melee attacks depending on the situation. At a first glance, Leon's kit is so much more powerful than the original game that it may seem completely busted, but the Resident Evil 4 remake has compensated for this by making the enemies hyper-aggressive. This game does not fuck around. There's moments where Ganados will full-blown sprint right up to Leon's face from 100 feet away in a matter of seconds, and tons of enemies will constantly flank you from all directions all at once. And with all the new ways enemies behave in this game, all of Leon's new movement options and knife abilities instantly feel justified for how chaotic situations can get. In fact, Leon's knife is now the de facto final defense against Ganados when they close in on him, which is both a blessing and a curse now that Leon's knife has durability. Using the knife on enemies while they're vulnerable on offense is the most optimal way to use it, but if you over-rely on your knife to break out of grabs and avoid insta-kill attacks, you'll eventually break it and lose all of its utility until you can repair it at the merchant. Overall, the new knife abilities are fucking awesome, the durability system does make it surprisingly balanced, and it also adds a bit more complexity to managing all your resources. Ashley also works a lot different in the remake. Instead of telling Ashley to either wait or follow, the remake changed this by either having her follow Leon closely to keep her in close proximity, or having her follow Leon from a distance and allowing her to spread out to avoid enemies. And considering how much more aggressive the enemies are during fights, this new system does work surprisingly well. Still, while Ashley is fantastic in the remake, I honestly still prefer her completely robotic AI from the original game. After all, all, the reason Ashley was such a perfect companion in Resident Evil 4 was because she artificially stuck to you like a magnet and could wait or hide away whenever you tell her to on a moment's notice, which is why whenever she gets hurt or gets captured in the original game, it's mainly your fault for not positioning her correctly. That's why when a lot of people complained about Ashley being stupid in Resident Evil 4, it was mainly because they kind of just suck dick at playing video games. Meanwhile, Ashley's new character AI in the remake is a lot more idiot-proof this time around because she's mostly self-automated. However, because her AI is more complicated and she's constantly wandering around during fights on her own will, this ironically creates some very clumsy moments where she'll comedically run face first into a sledgehammer or do some other dumb shit. Now, the remake does compensate for this by removing Ashley's health bar entirely. Whenever Ashley takes damage, she now gets put into an incapacitated state where she can either be killed in the next hit or be carried and taken away, which does alleviate a lot of potential frustration. So with all that said, while I prefer the way Ashley worked in the original game, I don't think those older mechanics would work as well in the remake alongside the new enemy behavior and level design. So it just goes to show how they've managed to adapt and balance these new gameplay systems quite well. Now, the best part of this remake is that tons of existing areas have been restructured and reincorporated into the game in very clever ways. Sometimes the layout of a room is almost identical to the previous game, but then they change the way you approach the room by entering through a different entrance and going through the room backwards. Or sometimes they'll repurpose an old area and keep it the same, but then they'll change the objective or add in different enemies into the mix to change things up. And then out of nowhere, you'll suddenly be in a completely new place you've never seen before, and now you have no fucking clue what's gonna happen. And then when you finally revisit that classic area you can navigate through blindfolded, the game will just pull out some crazy shit out of left field to keep you on your toes. It's actually incredibly impressive how different the remake can feel at times while also preserving the most nostalgic moments. In fact, while the game features tons of new content, the entire experience from point A to point B is still very much kept intact, and almost all the most iconic moments of Resident Evil 4 have been brought over to the remake with little to no changes. Now, if there's anything that the remake does that is objectively better than the original, it's that the sequence of events in between the village, castle, and island are a lot less stupid, and all the changes with the main cast have dramatically helped in this regard. Of course, that's not to say that the story in the remake is better than the original, because both games essentially have the same story. The only difference is that the original game kept a lot of the most plot-heavy story moments hidden away in text logs, where the remake brings this information to the forefront during cutscenes and reveals a ton of information to the player in a more coherent manner. Meanwhile, the main focus in the original game was essentially just saving Ashley, and the sequence of events from point A to point B was mostly just dumb video game shit, where you have to track down oddly shaped keys by going through some Looney Tunes set pieces in order to open up some bullshit door in classic Resident Evil fashion. As much as I love the original game, there's always that sobering moment I have on every single playthrough where in order to open up some random door, you have to ride a minecart for like 50 miles underground across the map, and I'm just like, bro, why the fuck am I riding a minecart right now? What the fuck am I even doing? Now, that's not to say that Resident Evil 4 is bad because it's dumb, because if there's anything I outright dislike about the remake, it's that it's not as goofy as the original. Ultimately, they struck a really good balance between maintaining the serious tone of the remake universe and incorporating the absurd campiness of Resident Evil 4 into it, but whenever the remake is trying to recapture the campy spirit of the original game, it just doesn't hit as hard. It fucking doesn't. Honestly, if you're the kind of RE4 purist who's replayed the game hundreds of times and believes that the merchant will never be topped ever again, then the remake will never be better than your own nostalgia, and that's just how it is. So with all that said, there's a lot of stuff about the remake that are fantastic. It has new combat mechanics, better graphics, updated levels, a much better presentation of the original story, and tons of new content. But there's also some things I'm kind of mixed on. You see, Resident Evil 4 is an absolutely immaculate game where everything serves a very clear purpose, but now the remake has taken this game and added a lot of minute changes on top of it that make it feel a bit more complicated than it needs to be. For example, the crafting system has been expanded in this game to allow you to craft certain types of ammo and grenades by using gunpowder and resources that you find throughout the levels, which is a cool idea, but considering how plentiful ammo already was in the original game, it honestly kind of just feels like an extra step that doesn't need to be there. Of course, the main benefit of this new system is that you can craft certain ammo types on the fly when you need it, so I do think it was a worthwhile addition, but again, this was never a problem I ever had with Resident Evil 4. It's almost like the remake is giving you less ammo in lieu of crafting materials and then adding this crafting system to then fix the problem of not giving you enough ammo in the first place. Again, it's not terrible in the grand scheme of things, but it's just different. They also expanded on the Blue Medallion side quests from the original game by creating an entirely new side quest system. In addition to the Blue Medallion side quests, the remake has also created tons of new side objectives you can complete throughout the game, which rewards you with spinels that can now be used as an alternate form of currency at the merchant to buy exclusive items. Most of the side quests are pretty fun, and there's even some optional super bosses you can fight, which makes for a fun challenge, but there's definitely a couple of side quests that are really fucking lame. It's like, yeah, go backtrack to the previous area and kill a couple of rats. Like, what? Now, to the game's credit, all the side quests are always active, and you can actually complete them at any time, which does make all these boring side quests much better on a second playthrough when you already know what you're looking for. Still, with this taken into account, I still feel like the new side quest system makes you spend a lot more time backtracking through older areas than you normally would. And if you're trying to complete all the side quests on one playthrough, it does feel a bit tedious at times. Now, one of the best new features in the remake is giving you new weapon shortcuts so you can change to different weapons without going into the menu, which is an amazing quality of life feature. But this had an unintentional knock-on effect of greatly reducing the importance of the attaché case, and that's kind of fucked up. Now, if that doesn't sound bad enough for all the rabid Resident Evil 4 purists out there, they also put the nail in the coffin by adding an auto-sorting button. They added a fucking auto-sorting button to the attaché case. Like, is this game for fucking real? Organizing the attaché case was the most iconic part of Resident Evil 4. That's like half the fucking game. I mean, they added so many quality life features that you might as well not even have an attaché case. Why even have it? You don't even need to look at it. The auto-sorting also doesn't even look aesthetically pleasing half the fucking time. There's no goddamn feng shui with this system. The guns are being thrown around willy-nilly, items are all over the place. You just aren't getting the same attaché case experience of the original game. Now, the trade-off to this monstrosity is that the shooting gallery has received a massive overhaul, and it's hype as fuck. It's such a fun shooting gallery that I legitimately wasted like 7 hours in-game on my first playthrough trying to S-rank all the missions. And what makes it so addicting is that you can unlock charms that you can equip to your attaché case to gain passive bonuses, which is a much better reward than the bottle caps or whatever the fuck you unlocked in the original game. They also added different types of attaché cases you can unlock that provide different passive bonuses, and you can sort of create builds based on the benefits, but for whatever reason, all the decent attaché cases that are actually worth jack shit are locked behind the deluxe edition DLC that I didn't buy, and you basically start out with the best one already, so this whole attaché case feature didn't fucking matter to me at all. Cool idea though. Of course, a lot of this stuff is very minor, and I am nitpicking a lot, but all these complaints are nothing in comparison to the remake ultimately cutting some areas from the original game. Even as someone who really enjoyed the remake, there are tons of minor set pieces and original dialogue that I immediately noticed were gone, and even some of the older content that was included wasn't nearly as good. So with all that said, while the remake is excellent and I do recommend you check it out, I do also want to be a bit petty and complain about all the minor things the remake didn't do. So if you haven't played it yet and you want to avoid some minor spoilers, skip to this time code while I complain about a bunch of extremely niche RE4 bullshit. There's your spoiler warning. First of all, the boulder trap in the remake is just not as cool. It's just a bunch of rocks falling off the side of the cliff. You can see it coming from a mile away. It's not even a fucking boulder. You don't run away from it like Indiana Jones and dodge at the last second, and it's so bad you can basically avoid the entire trap on accident without even knowing what happened. What the fuck was that? The first time you meet Louise in RE4 and you rip the tape off his mouth, he's just like, little rough, don't you think? But now in the remake, he's like, owie, ooh, ow, also changed one of the most classic lines for no reason. They didn't have the chairlift section in the remake. Come on, bro, it's one of the most iconic parts of the game right before the first major boss fight. You shoot the Ganados as they scream and fall to their death while Ashley does her little fist pumps. Oh, look, there's the chairlift right there. We didn't do anything with it. Fuck you. Leon doesn't say no thanks, bro, when he's talking to Midget Napoleon. Really? You kept in the stupid fucking bingo line because you knew how important it was, but you didn't keep no thanks, bro? That's fucking bullshit. You know what? Here's my review of the remake. No thanks, bro. Fucking got him. All the goofy traps in the castle didn't make it into the remake. They don't have the spike ceiling trap. They don't have the medieval pulverizer machine in the hallway you destroy in 2 seconds. They don't have the lava section in the castle. No fucking lava section. They don't even have the fire-breathing dragon statues. None of it. It's fucking bullshit. They cut the Mecha Midget Napoleon boss fight. The whole section where you fight enemies on the mechanical arms is gone. You don't run away from Mecha Midget Napoleon while dodging the pillars. This was the most important part of Resident Evil 4. Meanwhile, the remake's like, oh, we put in a little mini Mecha Midget Napoleon in the clock towers, a callback to it. Oh, it breathes fire on you one time, Like, what a complete limp dick lack of commitment. These fucking cowards could have actually respected the source material and made an entirely new mecha boss fight. They could have upped the ante and made it better, like a full-blown kaiju battle, but they pussied out. Typical remake pussy bullshit. The bad guys in the remake don't hijack the phone calls. They don't talk shit during FaceTime like they used to. Midget Napoleon's got his fucking old-timey intercom system and shit talks Leon, but it's just not the same. Where's all the funny dialogue? You can't pick up the Ganados with the crane and comically dump them in the trash. It's not in the fucking remake. I mean, why have fun? Why do anything? They cut the U3 boss fight in the remake. You don't even fight U3. Wait, what the fuck? What the fuck's U3? It's the boss you fought in the maze. You gotta escape the maze while fighting it. The fuck? I don't remember that shit. Where's the fucking laser hallway? Seriously, why did the remake not have the laser hallway? What the fuck are these guys doing? Now, some people may argue that the laser hallway didn't matter and it was dumb and it didn't make sense, and that's all true. But the fact that the remake didn't include it just goes to show that this game doesn't have the same priorities. Perhaps it was a decision to remove all the QuickTime events from cutscenes and they dropped the laser hallway because of this. Maybe they really wanted to maintain the same serious tone of the remake universe and thought the laser hallway heavily clashed with it and removed it as a result. Maybe they're cynically saving this room and other cut content for the future Separate Ways DLC to make more money. Or maybe they legitimately thought it was a pointless room that no one would remember. At the end of the day, the remake team looked at the entirety of Resident Evil 4 and came to some logical conclusion that all this cut content didn't matter and decided to remove it. Which leads us to a very important question. If the laser hallway is so stupidly pointless and could have easily been removed from the remake and not matter at all, then why did Resident Evil 4 have a laser hallway to begin with? Why the fuck did that game have a laser hallway? Seriously, think about it. Did Resident Evil 4 add it in because they wanted to easily capitalize off the success of the previous games in the series by maintaining an extremely consistent tone in order to guarantee they'll sell copies in future DLC in the most safeguarded, calculated, cowardly way possible? Fuck the fuck no! Resident Evil 4 had a laser hallway because it was bold. It was a fucking trailblazer. It was a game that completely shit over the established series, knowing full well that Resident Evil fans might not even like it, but they had an unshakable vision of what Resident Evil 4 would be and stuck with it. All of the iconic moments and set pieces are a product of Resident Evil 4's ingenuity, and the reason all this dumb shit is in the game is because they thought it was cool and had the fucking balls to go through with it. Meanwhile, the Resident Evil 4 remake has no skin in the game. They were tasked with creating a safe, streamlined experience that's not taking that many risks, that's already proven to be successful, that Resident Evil fans will already love. At the end of the day, the reason they could justify cutting the laser hallway and all this more obscure content is because they were able to retroactively examine the game with hindsight, knowing full well they could remove it without too much pushback by examining over 15 plus years of player feedback. Of course, I can understand why they made made those decisions, and the remake is still a good game despite this, but never forget what they took from us. So with all that said, while this game is a remake to a game that didn't need a remake, it's also about as good as a remake could possibly be. Now, is this game a replacement for the original? Absolutely not. Whenever I want to re-experience the Resident Evil 4 that I've known and loved, I'm going back to the original game every single time with no hesitation. But I suppose if I ever want to play a more updated, remixed version of Resident Evil 4, this remake is just another way to play it. The cool thing about this remake is that as time goes on, I imagine there will be a new generation of players who will revisit and replay this remake the same way I did for the original game. And those players who never played it can inversely go back and re-experience the remake in a different way by playing the original. To put it simply, it's a best case scenario for old and new players alike. So now that Capcom has been killing it with these remakes, I guess now the next step is to continue their work and begin remaking Resident Evil 5 and modernizing the beloved classic co-op game where you shoot down scary black people zombies in Africa. So good luck with that shit.